Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Michaela Peters. I've been getting quite a few questions about me making a English version of the video where I talked about what I did at NASA, and the feedback that I got on that video was that it was a little bit boring because I talked about what I actually did there, which, yes, work is boring even if you work at NASA. So I'll keep that brief-ish maybe because maybe it's not so interesting, or maybe if I'm going to in the weeds, you can skip that part and go to the more interesting part. Or maybe I'll try to start with the more interesting part. Let's do that. So at the end, I'm going to throw in some fun pictures of me sitting on console. Or you know what, maybe I'll just do that now to keep your attention. I always remember this day because it was Pi Day, which is a nerdy day, which, only works in the US because that's how we do our dates, where we do the month and then the day, not vice versa. So it's Pi Day. It was 3/14 of 2019, and that was the last time that I was at NASA, and I got to sit on console in mission control in Houston. That's where mission control is. That's where the whole Houston we have a problem thing comes from. Naturally, makes sense. And I got to sit on console with, there are all these different kinds of consoles you can sit on, and the one that I was on was Rio, which is the Russian interface officer. Actually, there are two different names for it, and I think they've changed it, and I could include a link to this because I think there's a Wikipedia link on it somewhere. So one of them is Remote Interface Officer, and then the other one is Russian Integration Officer, but because NASA has stepped away a bit from working so intensely with the Russians, I think that's why they changed it to Remote Interface or Remote Integration. Okay, I'm gonna have to post this below. But anyway, it was super cool because I got to actually hear all the different commands that were going on in Russia, because you work very closely also with the mission control that's in Russia. And yeah, so I got to sit there, I got to listen to people speaking in Russian, I got to see a whole launch, an astronaut get launched. It was Christina Koch, I think is how you say her last name, and I'm going to link that here below too. And yeah, that was awesome. That was like one of those things where I'm like, yeah, I've been working here 3 years in a row every spring, and this definitely brings the mission back to life because, like I said, NASA eventually does become just a job. And when people ask me, well, why did you decide to leave? Because it did become just a job, and it wasn't a job that I loved. I talk a lot in my Russian videos about how much I love my job now. I really do. I work remotely. I went to school for business analytics, and I work in the field of business analytics, so I work in the same field that I studied in, which is why I really like my job now, and that's exactly what I was looking for, but it was not something that, unfortunately, I could not find that kind of job at NASA. So I do data visualization. I work in Tableau. For some reason, that sounds complicated to a lot of people. I work with people who are doing way more complicated programming stuff, so I don't know. It doesn't feel complicated to me. But then again, I've been doing it for a while, so maybe that's why. Anyway, I digress with that. So when I first went to NASA, I was working in budget. I think I was supporting safety and mission assurance, and that's just a lot of Excel spreadsheets, a lot of crunching numbers, and I really liked that tour because it's my first tour, and it's super exciting. And as my one intern friend said, that by the time we came back the second year and I was not as into it, she's like, it's no longer the shiny new toy that it once was. And so yeah, like the first semester, the first tour as they call them, which was in spring 2017, it was the shiny new toy. And I remember how excited I was once I got into NASA. Like, I actually started crying. I got the call when I was at Rutgers, where I went for my undergrad, and then one of my friends saw me, and she was also happy for me, so I appreciated that. And yeah, I totally loved being down there. I got along really well with all the other interns. It was like I finally found a bunch of people who were just like me. So, there are still things that I really miss about working at NASA. I really miss the coworkers and interacting with everybody because, yeah, people who work at NASA are interesting, or they're at least really smart. I don't know, and they can be interesting to talk to. So, yeah, that was great. And I actually went to go visit NASA for the first time in 2014, and then I got in 2017. So I had that 3 years where I guess I was trying to get in, but I need to finish community college first and then get a GPA at Rutgers. And so that was 3 semesters later that I finally started applying, I think, something like that. And I guess I could also talk about, all right, I'm going to talk about a lot of things in this video, how I even got in, because for people who are American who are watching this, maybe this is useful for you. Unfortunately, if you're not a US citizen, you can't apply. Sorry, that's how it is. So I went to usajobs.gov, and like every day I would go on there and I would type in pathways program, and then see what came up. And I would apply to all these different type of pathways programs that I didn't even qualify for. So business, like general business, was the closest. So all business tours, specifically in Houston at Johnson Space Center, where I was, which by the way, I'm wearing one of these shirts today. This was like a 5K that was there. How old is this shirt? 2018. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so I would apply for every position regardless of whether I was well suited for it or not. I would apply to HR positions. I would apply to business positions. I'd apply to IT positions. Yeah. So I interviewed actually 4 times with NASA, and I got in 3 out of those 4 times. Now, the first time I got in, I had already accepted a summer internship, and I was like, well, they contacted me once. It won't be the last time. And I also really, even though I would apply for every center, I was really holding out for Johnson Space Center and Goddard Space Center because they were in places where I knew people, and I wasn't really... Yeah, as much as people think I'm brave because I travel the world, yeah, sometimes in the US I like to be near people I know. Maybe because I think it's harder to make friends in the US than when you're a foreign person. Because when you're a foreign person in another country, that's already interesting, and then people usually want to talk to you. When I'm in the US, like, yeah, I live here. I don't know. Although people at the restaurant do think I'm foreign sometimes, and I'm like, oh, maybe because I spend a lot of time abroad. Anyway, one of the other things, too, with working at Johnson Space Center is that when you're a business intern, you usually do at least 1 rotation in budget and then 1 rotation in procurement, and then the third one is whatever you want, and then that's when I was in the program planning office. So yeah, I guess going back to, I would go on every day and I would just apply to as many as I could. The one I didn't feel comfortable taking because I'd already committed to another job for the summer. Then I remember I got an HR one that was in California in the middle of the desert. It was like Edwards Air Force Base, I think. And I was like, I just don't want to be in the middle of the desert. So I kept trying, and I was getting pretty nervous because it was like, I was holding out and it was taking some months, you know, and me being an impatient type A person, that was excruciating for me. And yeah, Cleveland, Ohio was another one. I think it was another HR position or something. Yeah, like not super business related. And then finally I got in with Johnson Space Center. And at first they actually told me no. And then I think somebody dropped out. Yeah, when I asked them why, it was no. They said veterans preference because you get more brownie points with that. And then eventually they called me back like maybe 3 weeks later. It was around Thanksgiving time in 2016. And they were like, oh, you got it. And I was like, thank God. I was so excited. Okay, so anyway, I got there, had a great time in budget because my mentor, Chris, shout out to him, who I do still keep in touch with. Okay, Diesel wants to say hi. This one's Diesel. I usually show Harley. He's kind of hot, so I'm going to move him over. All right. Anyway, so Chris, I'm still in touch with. He was my mentor. The one thing I really liked about him, he was very direct. That's what I really love, is that everybody at NASA is very direct in their communication. So he was like, you make me look good, I make you look good. So we actually did win an award for like the best like intern mentor pair out of all the business interns, I guess. And yeah, I had a great tour with him. I sincerely really appreciate the time that I had with Chris. Then I went to procurement. For those who actually know me, I had a hard time there because I felt that I would always joke that procurement was like the black sheep of NASA because they were not very direct communicators, and there was a lot of like reading between the lines I was supposed to do that I was like, I don't have the social ability to do this, so sorry. So I did get into some trouble when I was working there. Like I wasn't doing things the way I was supposed to, but nobody told me, and then it got escalated. And so yeah, I mean, in brief, I had a hard time in procurement emotionally, if I'm being very honest. But you know, I learned some things. I worked on contracts, and so basically procurement and budget work very closely together. Budget's like, hey, we need to update these numbers, keep the program going. And then procurement's like, okay, well, we're going to run that by the contractor and adjust the contract. That's how it goes. So which one of those did I like better? Coin toss. I mean, I kind of liked the budget people better, maybe like on a personal level, because just easier personality wise, maybe more of a click there. Procurement, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I didn't love it. I'll just put it that way. Program planning, I actually kind of did love program planning because it just was more dynamic. And that was the tour where I got passed between like 3 or 4 different mentors, but they're all super cool. I keep in touch with them also. Yeah, I'm pretty good at keeping in touch with all of my former people. I actually did go to NASA, like to Houston, and saw a bunch of my friends back in October. That was really great. I had a nice time. I'd love to do that again. I probably will at some point. That's one of the perks of having a remote job. And so I got tossed between a bunch of people. I was still doing some stuff in Excel. The thing about the program planning office is, okay, basically the way it works is Congress is giving NASA the money, and you have to be like, as NASA, oh, this is what we're spending the money on, this is why we deserve the money. So that's what you're doing. You're having to explain why we deserve the money. Here are some figures. So there's still that budget element, but there's also like a political element to it where you're having to look at all the programs and make sure they're all doing what they're supposed to be doing, and then being a sort of figurehead to be able to advocate for the programs to Congress for why we need the money. So I loved that one. If I were to go back, I would love being there. I've heard that my whole team is still remote since after COVID, so I wouldn't even have to deal with, I got really tired going into an office. I actually thought for a while, I don't think I'm going to be able to do 9 to 5 because I just get too tired. So now I work remotely, and it's great. Okay, so what next? Again, I got to sit on console because I was pretty good at networking. I spent a lot of time at NASA trying to find a place where I could fit in. I learned Russian originally thinking that would help my odds of getting into NASA. It didn't. It had nothing to do with anything. And I would go around talking to all these important people, these like higher up managers, and being like, I speak Russian, how do I use Russian at NASA? And they're like, well, you can go work in Russia, and that's how you would, work for NASA and, be there. I don't even know if those people are still there. They're usually procurement people also, which again, procurement kind of mid for me in terms of actually working in it. So I wasn't, jumping at that opportunity necessarily. So, yeah, the answer is I didn't find a way to use business analytics or Russian at NASA. The issue with business analytics is it's usually an instrument that's used for companies to gain competitive advantage over other companies. And as NASA, you're sort of like the big cheese, and people are coming to you because you get so many people coming to you to do business with you as NASA, so you're not really trying to gain any competitive advantage. Like, you are the thing that people want. I guess because of the name. And also very honestly, and I did think about showing this in a Russian video, it's like NASA's still the government, so you don't get paid a ton of money for working at NASA until years into your career. So a lot of times, if I'm starting out at a corporation, I'm going to make more money than if I started at NASA. And then if I start at a corporation, then go to NASA, I have more bargaining power with my pay, which is also low-key a strategy I might be having right now. Because at some point I do have to go back to work at the U.S. government because I had a Boren scholarship. And I can also talk more about Boren scholarships later for anybody who's interested. Yeah, I have thought about that because that's another thing I wish there was more information about on the internet. Alright, so I had all these really cool tours. I had a lot of good memories. You got to take tours of NASA, and NASA's huge. It's like a college campus, and we used to have so many astronauts come speak to us, and they were so inspirational, and I loved meeting a bunch of them. And I don't know, actually Sunny Williams is my favorite astronaut because she's just like so down to earth. She's the one who did the famous washing your hair like shampoo video in space, and the reason why I like her too, aside from the fact that I just feel like she's, just like cool. It's like one of the things that she said, and I get a lot of comments about on my Russian videos about religion and stuff that I'm not, dying to answer. But she's like, you go into space and you see all these things from above, and you're like, there's no way there's not like something bigger, like a creator or something. And like I always think about that, and a lot of times people are like, oh, NASA, space, like people there must be like, because they're science people, like atheists or something. But that's not really true, especially in Texas, because you still have a lot of people from Texas in the South who work there, and in the South religion is much more pertinent than it is, for instance, in the Northeast of the US where I live. I think it's a bit more taboo here. There, it's like very normal to just be like, yeah, I go to church. Whereas I feel like sometimes in the Northeast, if you just start talking about that randomly, it's going to kind of like, people feel weird about it. So there's that. I'm trying to think what else to talk about with this. The that's kind of everything I can think of. I wonder if you guys have more questions with it. So yeah, getting in took a lot of work. It was great. I really enjoyed working there. I had these different kinds of jobs. I I got to meet astronauts. That's probably really the coolest part. I even got to take Russian lessons at NASA because I actually just did a video on the way that I learned Russian, and they offered Russian lessons to employees. And I'm going to show some of the books that they used for that because I have them right here. And it was really sad though because actually right when I was leaving, they got rid of these classes. I was at like a very high level compared to some of these people, so I used to scare other people in the class by accident, and that was kind of sad. And then when they got rid of the classes, which was the last time that I was there, I made my own classes, so I did like once a week where I would teach people Russian just as for a fun thing for me to do. So yes, I'm going to attach links to some of the things I've talked about below, and if you have more specific questions about NASA, I mean, again, I explained what I did. I explained the cool parts of it. Maybe I'll include a video with some other pictures at some point, aside from just the ones from where I'm on console, which are my favorite pictures of me at NASA. But other than that, I would highly recommend. And if you're sitting here thinking, oh, I'm not smart enough to work at NASA, don't tell yourself that. My mom told me that. I'm not sure if she remembers it. It doesn't matter. But like, honestly, I probably have a learning disability or something, which I'm not saying that, like, to mean anything, but I'm trying to say it to show that, like, you can have challenges, but you can still work at NASA. I think the thing that they look for at NASA is people who are very motivated. Like I was trying to say before, I worked at NASA. Sorry, yes, I worked at NASA. I visited NASA in 2014, and the thing that made me want to work there, and the thing I talked about in every interview, was how passionate people were. And when you're really passionate and excited about something, that shines through. And I was like, I wanted to be in a place where everybody's passionate about their job. And honestly, I do sometimes wish I studied engineering instead and that I had tried to do that. I kind of always told myself I was like too dumb to study engineering. Maybe not. Maybe sometimes I still think about if I want to go back to school and get a degree, but it sounds expensive and I already like my job right now, so maybe not. But yeah, so I'd encourage you to, what do they always say? Reach for the moon. And if you fall, at least you'll be among the stars. So just, I don't know. I always like kind of wanted to be a motivational speaker as well. So really don't sell yourself short, whoever you are out there. Try your best, and you never know the kind of stuff that you can achieve just by being motivated, really. So I hope that was inspirational, and I hope that was interesting. And again, if you have more questions specifically about NASA, I'd be happy to answer them. And that's everything. So until my next video, bye.